talking as if we're live because that's usually, oh, it says we're live. Welcome everybody to our talk show today. We're talking to Brett McCracken, April Fiet, Kirstin Leigh, and Daniel Corey today about authorship in 2021. We've got a great show and we've got a lot of really fun things to talk about, so I'm not going to belabor too much. Thank you for coming. Please feel free to comment live and we'll try to answer any questions that you might have. And I will pass off to April. Please tell us a little bit about yourself and your projects.
Thank you for inviting me onto your show, Betsy. It is wonderful to be here. My name is April Fiet. My husband, Jeff, and I live in Western Nebraska, and we have been serving the First Presbyterian Church out here since August of 2015. And my book project, I'm really excited about it. It's called The Sacred Pulse, and it's about reconnecting to God's rhythm and time for our lives.
Awesome. All right, thank you. And Brett.
Hello, I'm Brett McCracken. Thank you, Betsy, for having me on today. I am a journalist. I work for the Gospel Coalition, which is a big Christian website, a digital editor for the Gospel Coalition. So I spend my days editing articles, writing articles, producing content for our website. And then I've written some books as well. So my most recent book, which just came out about a month ago, is called The Wisdom Pyramid. I have a visual here so you can get the concept. Basically, I'm taking the concept of the food pyramid and applying it to wisdom. So my idea was, we live in this world with way too much information. We're bombarded with all these unhealthy kind of inputs of knowledge and information on the internet, and we need guidance for how to live in a healthier way in this world. So just like the food pyramid was guidance for physical health, by virtue of what proportions of what food groups you eat, the wisdom pyramid is guidance for spiritual health by virtue of what knowledge groups you kind of comprise your diet of. So that's the concept of the new book, and I'm really excited about it and excited to be here to chat with fellow authors.
Thank you, Brett. It's an awesome book. I'm not done with it yet, but I'm really enjoying it. And Daniel.
Well, I'm taking Brett's cue and getting a visual for you here. I'm taking the plastic off so it doesn't reflect on the light, but I'm going to show you one of my books here. But I'm Daniel Corey, and I'm a writer. I from Florida originally. I've been in LA for 19 years almost, I think 19. So I started off writing in for like small plays for regional theater, and ended up writing comics and graphic novels. And I did a few books for Image Comics. So I did this book called Moriarty with this awesome artist named Anthony Dietchidue. He lives right down the street from me. So this is his artwork, but we did this wonderful volume of stories for Image Comics about Professor Moriarty from Sherlock Holmes. And I did another series called Red City. And, I write movies and spec pilots and stuff. And I have a website for my company, Danger Cat. Danger Cat, that's Danger K-A-T-T. And I do a show kind of like this where I talk to artists and creators. It's called Makers. And you can see that on the website if you're interested. And that's kind of the gist of it. I met Betsy at church like, 12 more years ago. Here I think
it was 2004, which actually, I mean, that's when Brett and I met each other too, I think. Well, we went to Wheaton together, but we only like read each other's work, I think. I read Brett's reviews in the Wheaton College paper. We both wrote for the paper, but we didn't meet each other till we came to LA. My favorite of Daniel's projects is Prophet, which is earlier than Moriarty. I just want to mention that because I love it so much.
Thank you.
Kirstin, you're next.
Hello, very nice to be here. My name is Kirstin Leigh, and I am an author, a speaker, an addiction recovery coach, and the founder of the Change Your Story workshop. I have a middle grade fiction book called Believe. I also have Change Your Story, which is nonfiction. And my latest book is a workbook called the Change Your Story Workbook. And that goes along with the Change Your Story workshop, which is a faith-based scientific program that empowers you to break free from life-controlling issues and discover that masterpiece that lives inside. And we'll talk more about that later, but I'm very glad to be here. Thank you.
I'm so happy to have you, Kirstin. And one of my favorite things about Change Your Story is that it really talks about how much authority we have in our own lives, which as Christians, I think that we forget that God wants us to work together. He's not just in charge. We have a lot of,
Absolutely. That's the thing. It's like science has now proven that we can rewire our brain, which goes right along with what God has said since the beginning of time. We are transformed by the renewing of our mind. But so God frees us, but we still have to do the work that being transformed requires. And that's why we have the workbook. It is just, we dive into cognitive dissonance, the role our backstory plays in our God story, rewiring our brain, and all that entails, the process of forgiveness, the power in our words, and the role that spiritual warfare plays in change, as well as, becoming your own hero and purpose, the key to breakthrough. God created us. There's a million books, about finding your purpose, but really it's inside us. It's bigger than us. It's not about us. And that's why it's why we were created, which is why it's the key to our breakthrough.
Absolutely. So let's talk about, you've got these 2 great books, and then now you have a workbook for the first book. So is that your most recent project that you want to talk a little more about, or would you rather talk about Believe for a little bit?
Let's see. Well, the Change Your Story workbook, I kind of just told you about. It's all about diving into the mind and your feelings and your emotions and becoming the best version of yourself and letting go of all the addictions and bad habits. So I spoke a little bit on that one. So sure, we'll talk about Believe. It is a middle grade fiction. It is so awesome. This is a book that actually God gave me the idea for in a dream. And it literally changed my life. It taught me, the 12-year-old girl in this book taught me to believe again. She taught me to it's all about a vivacious 12-year-old that wants to prove to the world and her dad that, she's more than just a dreamer. And so she talks the school board into letting her do this musical for the younger kids. But on the day before her musical debut, due to this emergency landing in her dad's small plane, she's stranded in the middle of nowhere with no way of making it home in time for her own debut. So, she's disappointed and she's devastated. But what she finds is that no matter how good our plans are, God always has a better plan, and that our dreams aren't just for us. So it revolves around 2 12-year-olds from completely different backgrounds, an abandoned church, a bunch of bored kids in a town of lost dreamers, and these 2 girls that are going to change it up. And it's a series, and that is out. And then my agent right now is pitching another middle grade fiction I have. So we're praying about that one to get to the right place.
That's awesome. I was so impressed by Believe because I don't read a lot of junior high fiction anymore, but I read a lot of it. And so, I feel like, I love reading what my friends write, but I don't love everything that my friends write. So I'm very careful, what I say and how I said it. I've read 100 bad screenplays, really 1,000, probably 1,000. I don't know, but and like Brett and I were Brett was talking about writing scathing reviews. I used to write scathing coverage of bad screenplays, and it made me miserable. It was no fun at all.
Wow. And I should say that it's also a musical. So there's all original songs in this book. So the kids created a musical with, musical within the book. So it's all original music and yes.
That's right. There's a lot in that book for anybody who loves music and who has a big dream and a big project. And I think, well, I want to go to April next, because I think what you were talking about is we're all juggling multiple projects, right? And so God has an order sometimes for which project you should take on first that will prepare you for maybe the big dream. And April's book is about the divine flow of time. And I'm fascinated by this because I have not read a book about this yet, exactly the way that you described it. So April, can you tell us about how this came about? How does this question read? How did it come about? What did you learn from the experience of creating it?
Oh, we can't hear you.
Sorry about that. So a few years ago, I just had this idea for the entire outline of my book. And I started working on a book proposal, but as you said, Betsy, I am always juggling multiple projects. And so I got about halfway through with my proposal and just kept putting it on the back burner and putting it on the back burner until I received a request from someone to complete it and send it in. And they said, complete it and send it in within the next couple of months because I want to put this in front of some people. And so I did that and expected it to go nowhere. And when did it come to fruition that I was going to be writing this book in the middle of a pandemic? And so it was really a crash course in testing my theory. My original theory was that we needed to strip away all the excess from our calendars in order to find that divine flow of time. But what happened for me with the coronavirus is that all of my external activities went away or moved online, and suddenly I had my evenings free. I had time with my family, and I still felt scattered and busy and overwhelmed. And that's when I realized that the problem was a whole lot deeper than how busy we keep ourselves. It really has to do with our mindset and listening for that song of God that's singing over us, whether we are super busy or we're on lockdown. And so it was actually a really wonderful time to be writing this book. It was a gift for me to really consider some of these things. One of my favorite chapters is about snow days. And do we embrace those unexpected calendar clearing events, or do we try to fight against them and do the work anyway? And that really has just been so relevant and timely for me personally. So I'm eager to share this with other people.
Mm-hmm. That's awesome. Thank you so much. There's so much I want to talk about, but I want to go on to Brett first. Brett, you have 4 or 5 books out now.
4. This is my 4th.
Okay. So Wisdom Pyramid, how did that come about?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. It sort of connects with April, what you're talking about. We live in such a hectic, busy age, and we're hardly ever present in the moment, present with our own thoughts. And I think wisdom is, in order to be wise, right, you have to have open space in your life, and you can't just cram every square inch of your consciousness with more content, right? Which is what we do in today's digital age. You literally, if you have a 30-second gap in your day, whether you're waiting for a coffee or sitting at a stoplight, you pull out your phone. We instinctively grab for our phone. So the central premise of the book and the first line of the book is we live in a world with more and more information, but less and less wisdom. So in the information age, we have access to more knowledge, more information, more data than any generation of humankind has ever had access to. It's literally only just a couple clicks away, everything. But it isn't making us wiser, right? We're definitely not becoming wiser as a society, as a people. So how then can we become wise? How can we navigate this crazy, overwhelming information age? My 2-year-old is just running in chat. Go see mommy. Go see mommy.
I just came across, because I'm not finished reading it yet. One of my favorite things in Brett's book is that he talks about scripture and that, the word of God is the bottom part of the pyramid, is what the foundation for it. But also that he talks about the fact that scripture doesn't always make complete sense to us. And the first time we read it, a lot of times it doesn't seem like wisdom. And we really don't know what a lot of it means at first. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, sorry about the interruption. I thought I had locked my door. Such is life in the pandemic when we're all working from home, doing everything.
It's not a problem at all. Not a problem.
I have done so many podcast interviews with this book release where I have to be so careful. Where are my kids? What are they doing? So the question was about the Bible and how it's not always easy to understand, right? Is that what you're?
Yep.
Yeah, I put the Bible as the foundation of the pyramid, like the bread group. If you remember the food pyramid, our daily bread, scripture has to occupy the foundation of our wisdom pyramid just because it's the only like infallible source there is, right? So what else would we build our wisdom pyramid on except for God's word? But that said, it's not the easiest thing to understand sometime, and I admit that. And it's also a hard thing to like habituate, even if we like cognitively can say, yeah, like the Bible is the most important thing, it's still hard to like make it a regular habit. And especially in the digital age when we're like scrolling on our phones at every moment. And so that's why like I put the church as the number 2 layer, because I think part of like learning the Bible and understanding it in the moments when it's hard to understand is having a church community, an interpretive community to kind of to get at the meaning of God's revelation together.
Right.
And so if you're just with you and your Bible on a desert island, I don't know how helpful that's going to be, because we're 21st century people who are far removed from first century, Palestine. So how can we begin to understand it? But that's why the beauty of a church and church history, which is this great wealth of wisdom for understanding and applying scripture, that's why that also has to be a part of our wisdom diet. So that's the whole thing with the book, and the concept of the wisdom pyramid is a healthy diet actually draws from all of these different sources. So the Bible is the foundation, but you're not going to have a full kind of healthy, textured life of wisdom if you're not also pulling from the church and nature and beauty and all these other categories of knowledge that are out there.
Yeah, and for anybody who's watching who's not Christian or doesn't go to a church, previous to the church, it was the rabbis, right? Or there was another leader, there was a community or a temple or a fellowship that you talked through these scriptures with. It wasn't just, oh, here's a tablet, you better read it, and then interpret it your way. I think that'll send you straight off the deep end. Like you said, if you're on a desert island, you're going to think of your own interpretation. You really need to have some wisdom from the people around you. So
I think briefly going off of that, Betsy, like one of the things that is so important for our wisdom is just community in general. So I put church community in that spot because I'm advocating for kind of a Christian wisdom here, but really any community is helpful in someone's journey of wisdom, because you can only be so wise when you're just a lone wolf, right? When you're just kind of on your own path, following your own intuitions. Like that's kind of the popular sentiment of today, like just, be yourself, live your truth, follow your heart. But ultimately, like that's a lonely path, and you can only discover so much truth on your own. So we need community, we need interpretive communities to kind of hash out truth and meaning together. So that's
Thank you. That's awesome. Yeah. Speaking of which, Daniel and Brenda, his wife, are 2 of the people that I hang out with when I need to feel more sane. And they talk some good sense into my life, and
really,
and they just smile at me. That helps. Okay. And your books are, I would say that you have a really wide range of like contemporary, and you base your stuff on some stories that everybody knows, but then you have original works too. So tell us more about the most recent stuff and what brought you to it.
Well, so like I mentioned before, I've had some graphic novels published, so like you brought up Prophet. That was the first graphic novel that I did. I did it with Anthony, who also drew Moriarty in Red City for me. Gosh, where am I going? I'm sorry. What was the question again?
What is the first question? Let me ask again. What is your most recent book project? How did it come about? And what did you learn from the experience of creating it?
Oh, wow. Okay. That's good. Because I didn't even mention the most recent one yet. The most recent one was called Bloodworth. And it's the name of the lead character. And her first name is Brenda, like my wife. So Brenda Bloodworth. And it actually hasn't been published yet because it's actually under option, which is nice. I can't say anything. I'd love to talk about all the wonderful people involved right now, but I can't say anything yet. But it's under option as a TV project, And actually had some really awesome news this past week that I'd love to tell you guys. I could tell you offline, just not in public. So that's great. And it hasn't been published yet because it was under option, and there was a huge confluence of events, well, huge in my life, that came about to make that happen. The book was out to huge agencies and all these things, and it ended up on this internal list at UTA, which, for audience out there who don't know, that's a really big talent agency, and I don't even know anybody there, and somehow the book ended up on a list there, and that's how led to it getting optioned. It's a kind of a long and convoluted and uninteresting story to a lot of people, but anyways, that's under option, and that's the type of work that I do. I write things that are kind of like mainstream stories that have an underflow of my values as a Christian. So, like you can watch a movie like Blade Runner, and you can get a lot of spiritual insight from that movie, and that's kind of the type of thing that I like to do. So that's kind of like what Bloodworth is like. It's set in a similar sort of future as Blade Runner, and it's about an FBI agent who can enter people's memories to solve crimes, and gets involved in this web of conspiracy and chasing thoughts and chasing memories. And it was interesting. Just like this panel, it's like nobody ever asked you to do it, right? Nobody asked me to do this. Some people, when I would pitch the idea, like, oh, you want to do that, huh? Spent 5 years putting this book. Comic books take a long time. Spent 5 years on it, and this is the one that's kind of like really opened doors for me and such. So it's been a real blessing that way. But it's in the book, she has a father who's passed away that was a big like senator, like a Kennedy type person, and he's passed away. She never got to reconcile with him, and then she's chasing all these memories, trying to solve a mystery, and throughout the course of it, she reconciles with the memory of her father. And like through that, I learned how to reconcile a lot of things. I'd had some bad relationships that in my life that I had to get rid of, but in the past had good memories with those people. And over the course of reading this book, of writing this book and creating this book, I learned that memory really isn't what happened to you, what's recorded in the central core of your brain. Memory is what we kind of filter through our spirit and our soul. It's what we see and how we feel it. So we can kind of change things, not change the actual memory, but change how we relate to it. And so I was able to reconcile some memories with some people that were in my life for a particular reason at a time who aren't here anymore. I was able, it was healing, I guess is the word.
That's so good.
Yeah.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
I love that. And I love that, Daniel. It's so true. I love hearing about these projects. I realize I did not answer your question fully though, Betsy, on the Change Your Story book, since it is like my main brand and my main work. This book and then the workbook, the reason I created it, which is part of your question, sorry about that. The reason I created it is because I battled with addictions for over a decade, in secret pretty much. And there wasn't a program that was right for me. I learned a little bit here, a little bit here, a little bit here. I mean, I went to about 30 AA meetings, but I never spoke. I just listened. I went to church twice a week. I listened to 5 sermons a week. I wrote like crazy, asking myself question after question. If you ask why enough times, you get to the root of your issues. I would sleep with praise music on, just like literally every night. And there was so much, my acting background proved to be a tremendous asset because I ended up breaking down my life like an actor breaks down a scene. So I did all of these things. And I realized afterwards that I was rewiring my brain. And, there are some great faith-based programs out there, and there are some great secular programs. But the fact is, you need both. You absolutely need both. And so I created what I needed when my life needed a major rewrite. And it's nothing I ever thought I would do, but it's what I know that's why one of the main reasons God saved my life is so he can save so many others' lives through me and through the work he gave me and through the process that it took me. And the workshop was only 8 weeks long. Right now we're doing it online. So if you're listening, you can get your breakthrough a lot quicker than I did. And so
Amen. Yeah. What's interesting too is that, I feel like, there's a lot of books that I read that were self-help, especially in the sort of Christian self-help genre. I mean, I was in the Christian bookstore as a kid through teenage, all the time. It was like my one of my favorite places, or the library, at Wheaton, because I worked there. That was awesome. But yeah, there were a lot of things I would read about emotional healing, and I would read about Christian, breakthrough, but not understand that some of that stuff applied to me, and not understand that I needed to get into a group, and not understand that I needed certain kinds of counseling or prayer or deliverance, because I knew I had problems, but some of them I didn't think could actually be fixed.
Yeah, and they all
I thought they were part of me personally. Like, I thought they were just a part of my personality. There's nothing I could do about it.
I did that too for a lot of things. And Jesus came to give us an abundant life for freedom. So we can have that complete freedom. And one of the issues too is like bad habits without, like my alcohol addiction, it did not start out as an addiction at all.
Right.
But it became a habit. And then when life happened, all of that pain I hadn't processed well, like you were saying, Daniel, all those regrets, all the memories, circumstances, that habit led to that addiction that cost me years of my life. So really tackling those things that you think are just you before they become problems is a huge part. We can change our story, get it right before we get to that point.
Absolutely. Well, and April and I, one of the things that all of us have in common is real love for music. And April and her husband are musicians who used to play on campus at Wheaton. And
Very cool.
I know you're still doing that in a church setting, or you were before the pandemic.
Yeah.
That's not really the next question per se. But the next question is about the pandemic. I was debating whether to skip this question because part of me just wants to not talk about it.
Be done with the pandemic, exactly.
But because it's an authorship panel, I'm really curious about everything changed. We all had plans that got changed. And I'm really curious for you. Here's my question for everybody. And I think I'm still in the right order, right? Go back to April. How has the pandemic changed the way you write, edit, publish, or think about writing? And how has it changed the way you think about the future of writing and publishing? Keep in mind, we got 4 questions. We're about halfway through already. You can answer as much or as little as you want, but just know we have to stop at 4 because I don't want people to think that our show is always 2 hours. However, I want everybody to come back on again and talk about whatever they want again. So this is not your last chance to be on the show by any means.
I'm glad that you're not skipping this question, Betsy, because at least for me, I would love to hear from everyone else, but the pandemic just sucked my creativity right out of my body. And that was really hard for me to deal with. Creativity, music, writing, these are the things that I always have gone to in times of stress or difficulty as a way to put things back together again. And I suddenly had no energy for it. And in fact, the chapters of my book that I wrote before everything shut down for COVID, I ended up having to go back and rewrite them because my life just didn't feel the same anymore. And so the difficulty was that creativity felt like a lot more work for me. But the blessing of it is that I think I had a very superficial understanding of what God's rhythm for time and my life were before I had to really dig deep and think about it. And so I think that the end product, I think each of my chapters, it delves a lot deeper than it would have. And really, my book became a lifeline for myself. And I hope that it will be that for other people. But really, it's been a difficulty, but also a huge blessing.
That's good. Well, yeah, when you think about, there's so much imagery in the Bible about planting and cultivating and watering and how everything is, takes time. Everything good, takes time. But we're not used to that idea, even physically. Like, I'm physically conditioned by my phone and by the radio and by the internet. I feel myself twitching, literally like a junkie when I'm away from my phone. So I'm working on it and I'm really getting better. I'm like really proud of myself, but I'm not relaxed. Like, I'm not at the level of relaxation and health that I could be or should be because my phone has created anxiety problems for me. So, okay, who's next? Is it Dan? Wait, who's next? Daniel? Brett's next. How has the pandemic changed your writing and publishing life?
Well, with the Wisdom Pyramid, my book, it didn't really change much because I had finished writing that book before 2020. So I finished the manuscript in December 2019, right before, everything with 2020 happened. Although 2020, I think, kind of proved like the need for what I was addressing in this book in terms of our crisis of truth in this post-truth age, and how do we know what to trust, and how do we have a healthy diet of information. So in some ways, the pandemic benefited me and the book because it underscored the need for something like this. So yeah, I mean, and in terms of my day-to-day writing life, it also didn't change much because I worked remotely before COVID. My job for the Gospel Coalition is a totally digital organization, so there's no offices anywhere. So all of the full-time editors just work from where they live at home. So that was true before COVID, and it's still true. So in terms of my daily rhythms and my habits of writing, it didn't change much. The only thing that it changes, I used to go to coffee shops a couple times a week to get out of the house for a change of scenery, and haven't been able to do that as much. Although now they're starting to open up outdoor seating, which is nice. The thing I will say that's interesting for my work, the Gospel Coalition being a major Christian website, I think we're like in the top 10 of most visited Christian websites in the world. We saw a record traffic year in 2020 because more people were living their lives online, more people didn't have anything else to do, so they're looking for content online. So right, there's some industries have benefited from the pandemic in weird ways, and I think anything online, whether you're Netflix or Disney Plus or a website like the Gospel Coalition, we've been able to serve people in unique ways in lockdown and in the pandemic. And even specific articles that I was able to write over the last year. I had an article about masks and how Christians can think biblically about the mask debates, and that was like one of our most read articles of the year. And I wrote an article about how to navigate divisions in your church with all the political things to divide over. So it was actually a cool year for me with the pandemic in terms of like real-time issues that people were facing that I was able to speak into, that other writers for TGC were able to speak into. So it was nice to be able to have a practical way to help a little bit.
Absolutely. And that's an awesome change to have in a way, even though we don't want to be online all the time, to know that you're producing something that really is comforting to people or helping them, think in a healthier way, hopefully. Daniel.
Sorry, I didn't think I was next.
I know, she forgot me.
I'm sorry. No, I don't know.
You go first.
You guys, I am not perfect. Sorry.
No, Kirstin, go ahead.
Are you sure? I don't care at all. Okay, let's see. The prayer and creativity and purpose kept me sane during this time for sure. And I had just talked with my church about launching the workshop with them. We were doing everything live for the Change Your Story workshop because I share like a 20-minute message before we get into all of the work. And so my first thought was, oh gosh, what are we going to do now? And I just went deeper into prayer, and I transitioned it to where we could do it online. And all of a sudden God's like, think about this. On Zoom, you can leave your camera off. You can use a different name. How many more people are going to ask for help that would never ask for help with it being online? So I felt it open, and how much more need is there going to be? And people who have been, freed from things are going back, unfortunately. People who've never had problems are taking that extra glass of wine. They're not going anywhere. You're not driving. You're not doing things. So there's going to be more of a need for it. So I actually not written the entire book, because I researched and studied psychologists, psychiatrists. I read every book with issues, anything like mine. And I'd already done the deep work, but as far as putting the book together, I actually published the book during this time and launched the workshop online. And so, yeah, I just knew that I could not be by myself in my place without continually asking God, what next? What can I do? What can I do? What do you need me to do right now? How is this changing what I wanted to do? So really just doing that. So I think the need of knowing how I would have been if I was still battling with all kind of bad habits, how I would have been during this time, I can't imagine. I wouldn't be here right now talking to you. So just knowing that there are so many other people out there feeling that way, it put that need, that not a pressure, but a good, like that compellingness to work on it every single day and to work even harder. And so that's what I did during this time. And I am just praying and believing that people will now find out about it so they can
absolutely change your story. You know, it's so funny because in November 2019 was when I felt the Lord calling me to move out of LA up to Washington. So that was 4 months pre-pandemic. I did not like this idea. I mean, I was here for Thanksgiving and I was talking to my family and I was not excited about this because I was like, I haven't achieved what I want, anything that I'm not ready to leave. But I also was exhausted. So I was like, you know, okay, this is it. This is what I have to do. Thank God. I mean, when things went down, I already had my whole exit thing. Everybody knew I was leaving and I could tell people slowly. But right before I left, I mean, people had started, we had our movie night, you know, that usually is in Valley Village, you know, was online with now it was an online thing with cocktail recipes. Okay. So usually we have a drink together and watch a movie and I only have one, you know, I only ever have one if I'm not at home. And if I'm at home, I usually still only have one. But see, now if I want to have a cocktail with everybody on Zoom, I got to buy a whole bottle of liquor and I'm the only one who could drink it because nobody's going to share germs with me. And I was just like, the Lord knew. He was like, you have to get out of LA. You can't be sitting at home drinking a bottle of whatever. No way. No way. I mean, literally, I was like packing, you know, and I was like, this isn't good. Like, I cannot pack while I have a full bottle of whatever. So,
oh, I've done that. You get where you're going and you're like, what do I have in this suitcase? You think that I packed for something when I had a bus. Yeah, you did. That's what happened. But at least you caught that, Betsy. At least you knew, hey, this is somewhere I could have an issue. I'm going to change this before it happens. But what I have found out is you take you wherever you go, because you can still do that same thing wherever you go to. Right. But just knowing
you could, but I have accountability now because I'm living with other people who are watching me. You know, I've never drank you know, it's behind, like you said, behind closed doors alone. It's very different from, you know, with your family or with your friends. I don't want to misbehave. I don't, you know, so I don't, anyways.
That's a good quality. I just find ways to misbehave.
No, I still have it, but I don't need liquor to misbehave.
That's good.
You're so naughty, Betsy Freeman.
All right, Daniel, it's your turn. We won't go into any more details. We got to change the subject fast. How has the pandemic changed your writing and publishing life?
It's you know, been strange. A good thing that happened before everything that kind of sustained me through the first half of it or so was that I had already started a project. So I started to write my first novel. So I was outlining it, you know, getting the story down. I'd spent like some months doing that. At the same time, I was, you know, I just recently listened. My friend Julie Garnier was just on a show that my friend Laurel Harris produced, and they were doing a lot of just about life coaching and better living. And one of the things Julie said was pivot when you gotta. I was in a moment of pivoting in my life before the pandemic. You know, I was getting more into music journalism and music and writing music and all this. And like I was meeting like people I would listen to since I was a kid and interviewing them and stuff like that. It was amazing. But then that all got cut off, and that was, you know, pretty difficult. But yeah, I had this novel, and it was difficult to. I was going to write it anyways, but it was really difficult to write because it was kind of depressing. But I got it done a little faster because of all this, but it was a difficult thing living in this person's head because it was somebody that I had, was dealing with battling an abusive past and addiction and all this sort of thing. And it was a science fiction work. But I finished it last summer, and I remember I told Brenda, like, I'm going to finish the book today. I'm going to write the last chapter, finish the first draft. She's like, okay. It was a Sunday afternoon, and I just sat up in the living room and sat in the chair and typed, and I played records, and she went about and did her thing, and it was kind of a nice time. And we were listening to the soundtrack of Star Trek: The Motion Picture, the first movie, on vinyl. And I remember I was typing that last paragraph, and when that last line of that soundtrack is like da 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 ba da 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 ba ba bum ba 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 bum, I hit the last period, and I said to Brenda, I was like, I just finished. She goes, be dramatic about it, why don't you? But I don't know why I just told that. It was a nice memory. But anyway, I had big plans to do after that book finished, but I had all kinds of things. But I went through a long slog of the second half of last year trying to figure out. And in that long slog, I had this other productive moment of just with photography and graphic design. And then in December, I created a photo book that was kind of a pandemic diary of design work that I did, and that'll be available sometime. And it's called Map of the World. And if you go to my Dan Corey Instagram, DANCOREY, I did 100 days in a row of Map of the World posts. So you'll see it's overlaid. If you wanted to check that out, but that's going to be coming out as a book. But there's just been a lot more time to spend with myself in this period. So that's kind of the biggest change, I think. And that's been the most difficult thing, is having to sort through a lot of things and having to sort through dealing with things that you've been separated from, and like Brett, I work at home all the time before all this, and I quite struggled with that. I'd been doing it for probably 6 or 7 years at the point when all this happened. And I quite struggled with, being alone all the time, and then, my wife's not home working, so that's great. But there's still just this sense of just being alone with myself a lot. And that's been something that really dealing with. But then it's through that struggle that all this new productive work has come out, and I'm working on another, I went like 7 months without writing a new story, and I'm working on a screenplay right now, because those are frankly easier than novels. So, but all of this is a result of just like struggle. What am I going to do? Okay, this, but it takes so much. And I feel like the lead character from the novel, who has to wade through a lot of stuff in order to get where she's going, to figure out what she's going to do. And so, I guess we write what we know. But yeah, time alone, time with myself. I think that's been the hardest thing about all this, but also been the productive thing about all this.
Yeah,
I think it'll be the best thing you ever did. It'll make everything flourish.
I hope so. Thank you. I hope so.
That's right. Well, and I think that we have to learn sometimes to develop patience with ourselves. Maybe that's part of the reason that we're so frustrated being alone, is that writers we're very hard on ourselves, maybe more than other personality types. I don't know, but because personalities are widely vary among writers, and there's no two, extrovert, introvert, that can all be very different. All right. Third question. What was your first book project like for you, April? What was the most exciting part of the process, and what surprised you about it?
Well, The Sacred Pulse is my first official book project. So I can speak from that, but I've been writing novels for years. I participated several years ago in National Novel Writing Month, and wrote a trilogy out of that process, and probably should polish it up and do something with it. But I think the thing that was the most exciting part of writing The Sacred Pulse for me was learning things that I didn't know I already knew. It amazes me the way that God puts things inside of our hearts and inside of our minds, and we don't always know what it is until we find a way to speak it, whether we speak it through our verbal words, or we write it, or we compose a song, or however we might do it. There's just a way that truth can bubble up to the surface in ways that surprise and change our lives. So that having this book to work on through the pandemic has really just been a huge blessing in that regard.
Awesome. I don't know anybody's order anymore. Is it Brett next? Okay, Brett, go.
I'll go next, sure. So my first book was called Hipster Christianity. It came out 10 years ago, I think. And yeah, I mean, the most exciting moment, I think, was just getting the email from the publisher saying, we're going to publish this as a book. And when you're a first-time author, it's so hard to break into publishing books. And so it takes just a lot of connections and luck and just the stars aligning. And so I just remember where I was. I was actually in Oxford doing a summer conference with the C.S. Lewis Foundation, and I was staying at a hostel, and I was using one of those like communal computers. This was back in like 2008. And yeah, I just opened my email inbox and saw Baker Books, sent me an email saying, our publishing committee met and we love the concept you sent as a pitch and we would like to publish your book. So yeah, I would say that's just an exciting feeling for an author, and then being able to just dream of like, okay, this is actually going to happen. And it's like not just a dream, it's becoming a reality, and you can start to envision the finished product. And then from that moment, it's several years until it's out on, in shelves, people can read it. But yeah, it's a pretty cool feeling.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's obviously a lot of talent involved there, Brett, and a lot of hard work behind putting together your proposal and your draft. And it's not for anybody who, we're all at different places, and and anybody watching is in a different place. A lot of you, I'm sure, have a book that is put in your heart, or you've always wanted to tell, or a story you always wanted to tell. And that whole, scene of whether you go to a conference, or you pitch in an elevator, or you talk to your friends and say, would you help me get published? I mean, a lot of us just, people get stuck in that, and to get finally something picked up on that level, it's got to be so exciting for the first time. So thanks for sharing that. And Kirstin, what was it like? What's it been like for you, your first book?
Well, first, amen to dreams becoming realities. Yes. And April, what I'll share has to go along with what you first shared about the timing of everything. So the first book that I wrote was Believe for middle graders. However, the book I first published was Change Your Story. So when I first wrote Believe, I wrote this book and I was over the top excited. This had just changed my life. It was going to change the world. And so I immediately started sending it out to agents and this and that. And rejection. And literally, I used to have a file called Soon to Be Sorry. And I would put all the rejections in there. But what I realized was that not only was my book not ready, I wasn't ready. God was using this whole process of me not knowing. The story was great, and the story is still what it is. But, and I wrote it in 3 months, but however many years later, it was actually ready. And God wanted to make sure that when I did get rejection after rejection, that I wasn't going to go back to old habits, to old ways, that I was willing, that I wasn't in love with the dream of the book, that I was truly in love with him, the dream giver, and that I was willing to do whatever he said. And that included putting it down. And I felt like God said, it's time to put it down now. I was like, what are you talking about? This changed my life. This got me to writing for Tim's story for a thing he was doing. It got me, this is why would I put it down? Because God said to right then. And so then when he said I was going to write Change Your Story, I was just like, oh no, we don't need to do that. No one knows about my history. We're good to go. And I realized I made a promise to God that saved my life. And I said, I'll do whatever you say if you'll just use me. And so that meant, okay, I'll do whatever you say. So I published Change Your Story. I started speaking and preaching in different churches and organizations and pretty much sharing all the secrets I worked so hard to keep. And after that, then it was like, okay, now you pick up Believe again. And when I picked it back up, that's when it was published. And so that led me, down that path. So it's the timing. What we think should be first is not always first. And we really just have to listen to God and trust that, you know, through each thing, I needed believe that there's so many reasons for things that we don't ever know, but we have to make sure that we're growing from each process, that we are learning and available to hear correctly. Because a lot of times too, in the first version of Believe, a lot of things were just for me. They weren't for that book.
Right.
And we have to discern that. And so, you know, now I fully believe that, yeah, it's going to do exactly what God put in my vision the first time, but it wasn't the time. And now
Amen.
it is.
Amen. Yeah. I grew up with a dad who's a published author, and he self-published his first book. And when I was a little kid, he was on Oprah, he was on Sally Jesse, he was on Geraldo. And of course, I was a tiny child. I had no concept of who these people were. I just knew that my dad was not home and he was on TV. So looking back and reading his book, you know, over the years, and reading the books he's published since and going through it, my dad was never a fame seeker. Whereas I wanted to be rich and famous, and my dad would be like, no, why do you want it? That's not what you want. I didn't agree with him, but like looking back on it, that's not a life that any of us should want for itself, because it's got a lot of pressures and struggles and problems. Daniel, on to you.
Okay, my first book was, you mentioned it earlier, it was called Prophet, and it was a graphic novel, and I just came out of my love for old Clint Eastwood spaghetti westerns, and you know, I wanted to do something that really, because those movies are so kind of metaphysical anyways, I wanted to do something that pushed it a little further to where we actually went into the supernatural realm with these like spaghetti western type settings. So I did that. I actually was still living in Florida at the time. So I started on it in the late 90s, I think, working on the story. Came here, and I met Anthony Dietschy, the artist I mentioned. And, you know, we spent a couple years putting this book together. It ended up being like a 150-page graphic novel. And you know, and I'll give you the very quick Reader's Digest on just like all the work it took going to comic conventions and showing it to people, even just during the development stage, go around showing people pages, getting feedback, advice. It's a whole journey, you know, working your way into the comics world. And it was around 2009 we finished the whole graphic novel, and that's when digital publishing really became a thing. And so at that point, I ended up forming, out of necessity, forming my own company and putting the book out. And it came out through Comixology, which is a app that Amazon now owns that lets you read comics panel by panel on your phone and on your tablet and stuff. And that ended up being a huge, because you know, it's like now you can reach a global audience if you have a book that's halfway decent. So I was able to get Prophet out, you know, that way, and that was really nice. But the one that really was Moriarty, the one I showed you earlier, that's the one that I got published by Image Comics right after. And it, you know, that's kind of a thing in comics, especially. They want you to, as a writer that, you know, goes out and hires artists and whatnot, they want you to self-publish first, really, before you hit the stands with an established publisher. That's like a proving ground. So Prophet got me to Moriarty, and I came out through Image, and Image puts out The Walking Dead and some other things like that. So it was like, you know, quite a blessing to be able to break out with that. You know, there was just that moment of, you know, going back to what Brett was saying about, and everybody here identifies with, you know, when you get that email or whatever. I was actually on the phone with the publisher at Image, and I had been bothering him for about a year because he was interested in doing the book, but I still had to get that one thing. He wanted the logo just right. And I sent it to him, and I called him up. Did you get it? And I'm on the phone with him. He goes, yeah, we can use these. I'm like, you can use those. Does that mean you're gonna? You know? So that was the moment where everything, Prophet and everything came together. And in Prophet's actually been optioned a few times. And right now I wrote a screenplay for it that's done really well at some film festivals. I've won some awards for that. And so that's been a weird journey, because that project's been around for 20 years. And I've written like 3 different movies. And this latest version, which is radically different, is winning some awards and stuff like that. So I just never thought, you know, I'd win film festival awards from a book that I wrote, you know, that I started on 20 years ago. So yeah, you just never know where these journeys are going to take you. And that's the wonderful thing, well, like what we all do. Creative projects have a life that never really ends, and projects never really end, even if they're on the shelf. There's a creative journey that results from them, whether it's from that project or leading you to another one, leading you to meet somebody. So yeah, that's what The first book
So
profit.
true.
Yeah.
So true. So well said.
Thank you.
Yeah, Daniel does a tremendous amount of just being a great friend to people. And he flies down to Florida to talk to college students and mentor them. And he's on panels and all this kind of stuff. You know, there's all this behind the scenes real care that he puts into other people. And
Thank you.
and then this year, I mean, especially this year, but I think it's been a few years. Every other week, there's a new award he's been winning for his screenplays.
That's
Well, I don't know about
amazing.
that,
And you're actually about one of the people left that actually live near me. So this is great news.
but.
And Betsy, should we all share like how to get in touch with us? Should we all share that?
You're more than welcome to do that, you know, or I recommend right after the show, just posting right on the Facebook Live so that people who are watching, because honestly, some people watch during the show and usually there's like anywhere from 300 to 800 or whatever people who watch the show afterwards, according
Okay,
to
great. Thank
the
you.
metrics that I often forget to check.
And I can't wait to check out more of all of your work as well.
Yeah.
Oh man, now Daniel, where can we order your comic books?
Well, some of them are on Comixology, which is
Okay.
Comixology. It's an app and a website, and also on Amazon. You can find Moriarty there, Moriarty in Red City. And
Are you
Prophet-
all on Amazon?
Yes.
Yeah.
You can go to kirstinleigh.com, KIRSTINLEIGH.com, or Amazon. The Change Your Story workbook, even I don't advertise it at all because it is designed to
Yeah.
go along with the workshop. That
Okay.
information is on kirstinleigh.com as well, or the
Okay.
Change Your Story workshop.com.
And April, can we pre-order now or not yet?
Yes, it is. It's up and available. So that's very exciting. But it's on Amazon, IndieBound, and then Broadleaf Books is the publisher. So you can go on their
Broadleaf.
website as well.
IndieBound, I'm gonna check that out.
April, I want you to polish those 3 novels and get them out.
Oh,
Mhm.
thanks.
I want you to do that.
Yes. Yes. Okay. So last question. We've got 4 minutes. Ready?
Did we find out how to find Brett's books though? Did you say where we could find yours? Is it Amazon?
What's
Oh.
the best place?
Amazon is probably the
Okay.
easiest. Yeah.
Got it. Cool.
But it's Baker Books still?
No, my new one is Crossway.
Crossway.
Mhm.
Awesome. Okay. So let's see. Okay. What's your best advice for folks embarking on their first book project, April?
Just do it. For me, my perfectionism gets in the way all the time. And so things get put on the back burner, on the back burner, on the back burner, but done is better than perfect. So if you have a story that's inside you, just tell it.
Good. What is the perfect story? We're not supposed to have that, right? Brett?
Yep.
Yeah, I would say make sure it's a topic that you are just in love with and personally passionate about, because you're going to be living with this for a long time. And the passion you have will be infectious for readers. So if you're kind of like, you know, ho-hum about it, that's going to come through. So pick a topic, invest yourself in a book that you can't not write. Like it's something that has to get out. And also I would say write first for you, right? Write as if no one else reads it, it's fine, because ultimately the process of you writing it was valuable in its own right. So
Absolutely.
So
So
good.
good.
Both of yours. Mine is be prepared to do everything yourself. Especially if you self-publish, every single thing, every single detail you are, no matter how many editors you hire, somebody you hire to do your whatever, you are in charge. And you have to literally do everything yourself. And even if you have an agent, which I now do, they still expect you to do a lot of yourself. So just be prepared. Oh, writing the book is the very beginning. That's actually the easy part. So being ready is a business. And you write your love. Are you writing for you? Always what Brett said, I totally agree, but also be prepared that it is a business. And so you have to have that mindset as well.
mhm.
That's so good. Yeah. I think as an editor too, make sure you edit your own stuff as much as you possibly can, because you don't want that taken out of your hands. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I've seen books published and I'm like, oh my gosh. Yeah, absolutely. And not just once. I mean, I probably read the workbook over 100 times. And just, especially when you're speaking God's word, because you have to really be sure, God, is this the way you want me to say this? Is this the way it's going to get the message across the most? Is this correct? So depending on if you're
Right.
writing fiction or nonfiction, there is so much to it. But like April said, just do it.
Amen. Thank you, Kirstin. Daniel, why don't you close this out, and then I'll say goodbye. This has been so much fun.
Yeah, thank you so much for having us on. It's been a great time. I guess my advice is it's a lot of what everybody else was saying. Was the main thing is finish. Please start and please finish. I'm a huge advocate for studying craft and learning, about structure and things like that. But you can learn all of that within a reasonable amount of time. You don't have to spend years on it. I wrote my first script after studying for about 8 months or something, learning story structure, and I wrote a pretty decent script after that. But put in some time and work. Don't think you have to spend 10 years doing it. Put in some time, work, learn the craft, and then start your story and then finish. And just like everybody was saying, Brett was saying in particular, making sure it's important to you. Because like I said, anything that I've done that's ended up mattering has been something that nobody asked for. Nobody asked me to do a Professor Moriarty graphic novel, but then it turned out nobody had ever done one. So that was a huge win. And do something that nobody's asking for. Don't necessarily do something that's in vogue just because I think I can make this work because everybody's doing this right now. That's not a great idea, especially in the beginning. If you're very experienced, you can maybe pull something like that off. Okay. But yeah, do something that matters. Do something that matters to you. Do something, if it matters to you, you're hoping it'll matter to everybody else, and finish it.
That's right. So thank you so much all for being here. Believe it or not, outside my window here in Washington State, it is hailing. It's like light hail and in sunshine, or like whatever you call it, grapple or something. And so that's why I keep looking weirdly out the window, because I haven't seen that in a long time. Blessings to all of you. Please do post your links on the bottom of the show so that everybody can buy your books and read them, and come back and be a guest again. Have a great night, everybody.
Nice meeting all of you.
Thank you so much.
You have to
Nice.
definitely